Imagine you're walking through a forest 10,000 years ago. No roads, no paths, just you, the wilderness, and whatever is currently trying to eat you. You're moving fast because the hunting party is ahead, and falling behind is not a great survival strategy. Then your foot catches a root. You go down hard. You hear a sound that no living creature ever wants to hear coming from their own body, and you look down and realize your leg is broken. No hospital, no ambulance, no X-ray machine, no little paper gown that opens at the back for no reason anyone can explain, no painkillers, no doctor, no anything. Just you, the dirt, your extremely concerned tribe, and a problem that, in the modern world, gets fixed with a cast, some ibuprofen, and 6 weeks of watching television. But this is not the modern world. This is 10,000 years ago. And a broken bone out here is not an inconvenience. It is a crisis. So what happened? What did ancient humans actually do when someone broke a bone? The answer is stranger, more creative, more brutal. And honestly, more impressive than most people would ever expect. Let's start with the most important thing you need to understand about ancient life, because it changes everything else. Breaking a bone today is painful and annoying. Breaking a bone 10,000 years ago could genuinely end your life. Not because bones work differently. They don't. A femur fracture heals in about 6 weeks, whether you're living in 8000 BC. Or right now. The problem was everything else that came with it. Ancient humans didn't have the luxury of lying still for 6 weeks. There were no grocery deliveries, there were no backup systems. Every adult in a small tribe of 30 or 40 people had a job. Hunters hunted. Gatherers gathered. People who could carry things, carried things. People who could build shelters, built shelters. The group ran on full participation, and there was almost no margin for error. A broken leg didn't just mean pain. It meant you suddenly couldn't contribute anything. You couldn't hunt, couldn't gather, couldn't run from predators. Couldn't do much of anything except sit there and hope your tribe liked you enough to keep feeding you while you healed. Which, as we'll see in a moment, most of the time, they actually did. But first, let's talk about what breaking a bone out in the wilderness actually looked like, because it was significantly worse than what most people imagine. In modern life, the most common broken bones are wrists and ankles, things you break falling off a curb or being overly confident on a bicycle. Ancient humans broke things differently. Archaeologists studying prehistoric skeletons have found fracture patterns that tell a very specific story about ancient life. Broken ribs from being kicked by animals, cracked skulls from falling out of trees, shattered leg bones from falls on rocky terrain, fractured arms from fights, and some truly spectacular spinal injuries from, presumably, things going very wrong during a hunt. Ancient humans were not breaking their wrists tripping over a step. They were breaking their bones in situations that involved large, angry animals, significant heights, and a general level of physical chaos that the modern world simply doesn't prepare you for. And here's the part that makes it significantly worse. When you break a bone today, you go to the hospital within hours. The bone gets set properly. It heals in alignment. Ancient humans didn't always have that luxury. Some fractures healed crooked. Some healed with bones overlapping. Archaeologists have found prehistoric skeletons where a broken femur healed at an angle that would have given the person a permanent limp. The bone healed. The person survived. But they walked differently for the rest of their life, which, out in the wilderness, was its own kind of problem. So what did they actually do? The first and most critical thing that happened when someone broke a bone was that other people showed up. And this sounds obvious, but it is actually one of the most profound things archaeology has discovered about ancient human behavior. A broken femur in the prehistoric world was essentially a death sentence for anyone living alone. The femur is the largest bone in the human body. When it breaks, you cannot walk, you cannot hunt, you cannot run. In a world filled with predators, infections, and the constant need to find food, a person who cannot move is a person in serious trouble. But archaeologists have found 15,000-year-old femur bones that are clearly broken and clearly healed, which means the person survived, which means someone kept them alive for the 6 weeks it took for that bone to knit back together. Someone brought them food. Someone helped them move. Someone protected them when they couldn't protect themselves. In prehistoric Patagonia, researchers studying hunter-gatherer remains found this wasn't rare or exceptional. Care for injured tribe members appears to have been standard practice. Not charity, not heroism, just how things worked. The tribe treated injured members because losing a person, even temporarily, was a serious blow to a group of 40 people. Every adult represented skills, knowledge, and labor that couldn't easily be replaced. Keeping an injured person alive and recovering was an investment, not a kindness. Though, to be fair, it was probably also a kindness. but caring for someone is different from treating them. And ancient humans didn't just keep injured people alive and hope for the best. They actually tried to fix the problem. And this is where things get genuinely interesting. The evidence for prehistoric bone treatment is older than most people realize. Neolithic human remains show fractures that were splinted with bark and sticks and secured with bandages made from plant fibers. Not sophisticated, not elegant, but mechanically correct. A splint immobilizes the break, prevents the bone from moving out of alignment while it heals, and reduces pain. Those are the same goals a modern orthopedic cast serves. Ancient humans figured this out not by studying medicine, but by watching the world around them. Researchers believe ancient humans may have gotten the idea partly from observing injured animals. A deer with a broken leg will naturally stop moving it. It will favor the limb, keep it still, protect it. Ancient humans were extraordinarily observant about animal behavior. Their survival depended on it. Watching injured animals instinctively immobilize broken limbs may have been the first lesson in fracture treatment humanity ever received. The Shoshone people wrapped broken limbs in strips of fresh rawhide soaked in water and allowed it to dry and harden around the injured area. It became a natural cast. Tribes in the Amazon used clay in the same way. Colonists in Australia documented Aboriginal communities encasing broken bones in mud to set them. Different continents, different cultures, completely different materials. The same basic idea arrived at independently across the world because it worked. Now, setting a bone is one thing. The pain of a broken bone is something else entirely. Here is where ancient pain management gets both creative and deeply uncomfortable to think about. Willow bark. This is the ancient world's answer to ibuprofen, and it actually worked. Willow bark contains salicin, a compound that the human body converts into salicylic acid, which is the active ingredient in aspirin. Ancient Egyptians used it, ancient Greeks used it. Hippocrates, the father of medicine, wrote about using willow bark to treat inflammatory pain around 400 BC. Sumerians used it. The same treatment appears across ancient Egypt, Greece, China, South America, and the Middle East, thousands of miles apart, discovered separately, because willow trees were available and the pain relief was real. Ancient humans chewed willow bark, boiled it into tea, and applied it as a paste to injuries. It reduced inflammation. It genuinely reduced pain. They didn't know why it worked. They just knew it did, and they kept using it for thousands of years until modern chemistry figured out the exact molecule responsible and turned it into a pill. This is the part where you have to quietly acknowledge that ancient humans were not simply stumbling around hoping for the best. They were doing empirical medicine. They tried things. They observed results. They remembered what worked and taught it to the next generation. They also tried a lot of things that absolutely did not work. For skull fractures, ancient Egyptians prescribed applying a paste made from ostrich egg around the wound while chanting to the goddess Isis. The ostrich egg paste did nothing useful. The chanting did nothing useful. But the willow bark they used alongside it, that part actually helped. Ancient medicine was a strange mixture of accidental genius and confident nonsense, which, if we're being honest, was not entirely unlike some modern medicine up until embarrassingly recently. And then there's the Shanidar Cave. In the mountains of northern Iraq, archaeologists discovered the remains of a Neanderthal, not a modern human, a Neanderthal, who lived approximately 5,000 years ago. Researchers named him Shanidar I, and his bones told one of the most remarkable stories in the entire history of human medicine. Shanidar I had survived catastrophic injuries. He had a severe crushing injury to the left side of his skull. He had a withered right arm that had been either injured or amputated at some point and had healed over. He had injuries to his legs and feet. He was essentially a walking record of everything that could go wrong in a prehistoric life. And by the time he died, he was somewhere between 35 and 50 years old, which for a Neanderthal was genuinely old. Researchers from the University of York examined him and concluded that, with his injuries, Shanidar I could not have survived without extensive ongoing daily care. Someone fed him, someone helped him move, someone looked after him for an estimated 10 to 15 years of severe disability. Not a relative, not a partner, his entire community. A Neanderthal. Not a modern human, something older, something we generally think of as more primitive than us, was providing long-term compassionate care for a severely disabled member of their group tens of thousands of years before anyone wrote anything down. Sit with that for a moment. But not every broken bone story ends with compassionate care and willow bark tea. In 2022, archaeologists made a discovery in a cave in Borneo, Indonesia, that completely rewrote what we thought we knew about ancient surgery. They found a skeleton approximately approximately 31,000 years old. The skeleton was mostly intact, but it was missing its left foot and the lower part of its left leg. At first, researchers considered the obvious explanations: animal attack, accident, but the remaining leg bone showed something that ruled both of those out. There was a clean, precise, slanted cut. The bone had healed over cleanly. There were no signs of infection, no signs of a crushing injury. What they were looking at was a deliberate surgical amputation, 31,000 years ago, performed with what was almost certainly a sharp stone tool. Performed successfully enough that the person survived the surgery, recovered from it, and lived for another 6 to 9 years afterward. To be clear about what this means, someone 31,000 years ago with no concept of germs, no anesthesia, no antibiotics, and no surgical training in any modern sense of the word, cut off another person's leg, managed to control the bleeding, somehow prevented the wound from becoming fatally infected, and kept that person alive through the recovery. Nobody knows exactly how they did it. Researchers speculate about medicinal plants in the region with genuine antiseptic properties. They speculate about techniques for controlling blood loss, but the exact method remains unknown. What's not unknown is the result. It worked. The person lived. And whoever performed that surgery understood more about the human body than we give them credit for. So what does all of this actually add up to? Ancient humans, when faced with a broken bone, did not simply lie down and accept their fate. They improvised. They observed, they experimented, they built splints from whatever the environment offered. They discovered pain relief in plants that modern science confirmed actually worked. They learned to set bones by watching injured animals. They cared for the injured when the entire logic of survival might have suggested leaving them behind. And occasionally, they performed surgery that was sophisticated enough to save a life in conditions that should have made survival impossible. The 31,000-year-old amputee in Borneo lived for years after losing a limb in a world without hospitals, antibiotics, or any of the things we now consider the minimum requirements for surgical survival. The Shanidar Neanderthal lived for over a decade with catastrophic disabilities because a community of people decided his life was worth the effort of maintaining. The 15,000-year-old healed femur in the fossil record exists because someone, somewhere, kept a person alive through 6 weeks of helplessness in an environment that was under no obligation to be forgiving. These were not primitive people randomly hoping things would work out. These were humans and, in Shanidar's case, something close to humans doing the best possible medicine with the tools and knowledge available to them, which turns out to have been considerably more than nobody. The next time you complain about sitting in a hospital waiting room, or being annoyed that your cast is itchy, or grumbling about 6 weeks without playing sport and look, those complaints are entirely valid. Waiting rooms are genuinely horrible. Just remember that 15,000 years ago, somewhere on Earth, a person broke the largest bone in their body and survived because their tribe carried them, fed them, and kept predators away for 6 weeks while they healed on the ground. No ibuprofen, no X-ray, no Netflix, just people who decided that one of their own was worth saving. And somehow, against everything, it worked.